All right, so who are we talking to today?
Hey, my name is Tom Smith. I'm an economist and a finance professor at Emory's Goizueta Business School.
So, Tom, we've got the stimulus programs kind of winding down right now after a couple of months. What is that going to mean to people?
Well, there's a couple things that are kind of coming off the table, if you will. So there was an additional $600 on top of the unemployment insurance. A lot of people have been talking about that. That was is due to expire tomorrow. Chances are excellent that most people actually collected that for the last time last weekend because of the way that those elements are paid out. So that's coming off the table. There had also been um, some moratoriums on evictions and some moratoriums on rent forgiveness and mortgage forbearance. And there might be about a month left for eviction moratoriums, and they weren't allowed. A lot of people, if your house was had a mortgage that was financed by a Freddie or Fannie Mae, some government agency, then you were prohibited from evicting any of your tenants, and then you have to do a 30-day notice before you can bring it in front of a judge. And so for a lot of, at least dwellings that are under that have a mortgage that are financed by a federally backed organization, then you had a moratorium on evictions, and now you can submit a 30-day evict notice now. So people are probably going to start being evicted. It's a bad scene.
So, there's been some conversation that this extra money has been disincentivizing people from going back to work. What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, originally I was in that camp. I thought that it was probably disincentivizing some people. I don't think it wasn't disincentivizing everybody. Then I saw some numbers that suggested that the opposite is happening. That people who are receiving this extra $600, so the people who are benefiting the most from that money, were actually going back to work and working the most hours. So even though there are probably some bad actors, there's probably some people who are not going back to work because they're receiving those funding. It doesn't seem that that's the consistent impact. So I think that it's actually been very helpful for people to pay down debt. We're seeing saving rates go up. We're seeing consumer debt go down, helping them pay their mortgage, helping them pay their rent, helping them pay their car payments. So the fact that we're not seeing the huge collapse across the market means that extra $600 was probably helping a lot of people.
So, a lot of the people who are out of work, are there going to be jobs for all these workers when they want to go back to work?
Well, sort of depends on when they want to go back to work and what that means. This recession that we're seeing was not caused by a failure in one particular sector like we saw in 2008 and 2009, right? There was a collapse of the housing sector. People couldn't make their mortgage payments. Banks were collapsing. People were betting against the housing market. And then when things started going sideways, a lot of people lost their jobs. And then that spread throughout the economy, but people could still, let's say, get jobs as waiters or as a bartender or something of that nature. We just aren't seeing that same kind of ability for people to go out and get side hustles, because the shutdown of the economy was mandated because they wanted to keep people safe, right? They're saying shelter in place, stay at home, quarantine, and shutting down of all non-essential businesses, right? So like restaurants, like bars, like movie theaters. So where are people going to go, right? And it's not like the economy can just come back as long as there's COVID around. So people are still scared to go out. People are fearful of contracting this. They want to keep themselves healthy. So it's not like there's a portion of the market that if we just fix that market, then the rest of the market would be fine. It spreads across all markets. I mean, this is a health crisis. And so the ability for a portion of the market to absorb, let's say, the unemployed persons, it just doesn't really exist because it's consumer driven. People are being driven away from buying things because they need to shelter in place. Well, there's no way for the rest of the market to absorb that.
So what does an economic recovery look like in this situation? Is it a V? Is it a U? Is it a W? What does it look like?
Well, certainly not a V, right? I mean, we're not seeing that at all. As a matter of fact, numbers came out that suggest that initial unemployment claims are actually going up again. And we just saw the largest drop in GDP that we've ever seen. It's just insane. 35% drop in GDP. It's ridiculous. It's awful. So I think that it's probably going to look more like a sawtooth, or if you will, the front of Charlie Brown's sweater, right? Where you're seeing, you saw this huge drop, and then you might see like an increase a little bit, and then another drop, and then another increase, and another drop, and another increase. It looks like a bunch of teeth on a saw.
So we're going to call this the Charlie Brown recovery.
The Charlie Brown sweater recovery. That's it. I mean, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that like we're starting and stopping in fits, right? It's like, okay, we want to get energized, we want to all go back to work, and then it's okay, now everybody's catching this, and we've got to quarantine again. We have to isolate again. We have to shut down non-essential businesses again, and then we open them back up, and then we have to shut them down again. A good example of this is California, but they were opening up, and now then they have new mandates to shelter in place, and then they can open up again, and then they get new mandates to shelter in place, shut down non-essential businesses. With this starts and stops, these fits, you're going to get this sawtooth kind of recovery.
So I know you've talked about how we need to get the health issue under control first, but as a federal government, what does the government need to do to help the economy come back faster?
Well, they're doing the right kinds of things. It's not clear that they're doing it in the right magnitude. So offering checks, stimulus checks to individuals, offering stimulus checks or bailouts to companies, offering loan programs to small businesses, making it easier for businesses to get lines of credit, get their hands on capital. The Fed is doing the right thing by creating an unprecedented amount of liquidity. So the Fed is buying everything. They're buying corporate bonds. They're probably going to be buying equities. If shortly, the size of the Fed's balance sheet has grown exponentially. And so everybody's doing, I think, what they need to. It's not clear that they're doing it in the right magnitude, right? And so the magnitude might be, let me start that again. It's not clear they're doing it in the right magnitude. So are $1,200 checks enough, or should they be three times that? Was the $600 on top of the unemployment insurance, was it too much, or was it too little? Should it be something more like $1,000? So it's the magnitude of the fiscal policies need to be consistent with the magnitude of the shock. Okay, and the magnitude of the shock is unparalleled. We've never seen a 35% or 33% drop in GDP before.
So the idea that the aid would go from 600 a week to $200 a week or $300 a week. What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit too little, right? I mean, I think about an analogies, telling stories through visuals and helping people understand what's going on. If the government is putting up a ladder, right, and you're putting a ladder up against the side of your house, you want that ladder to extend 3 feet beyond the gutter, right? You want it to extend above what's necessary. If you come up an inch short, you're going to fall 2 stories to your death, right? It's so you say, wait a minute, but if the government's offering a couple $100s, that's better than they would have gotten if they were just regularly unemployed. Yeah, but they're not unemployed because the business has bad practice or because a worker's not being productive or something like this. They're being unemployed because people want to be safe. Like, we have to put a stop to the spread of this virus. And so, I think the $600 was actually a really good plan. I think it kept a lot of things alive in terms of our economy. And then dropping it to $200 is probably going to be a little bit too little. If they have this $200 unemployment insurance, but they add it with additional programs, then you might be able to sustain that. You might be able to keep people away from, even a worse situation. And when I say worse situation, I'm talking about not being able to make rent payments or mortgage payments, not being able to pay the rest of their bills, not being able to pay for food. I mean, and that's critical. Like we need to be able to keep people safe and alive and provide them with resources that allow them to live, right?
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Tom.